You're listening to the Common Descent Podcast.
Hello, David.
Hello, Will.
And hello, listeners. Welcome to episode 197 of the Common Descent Podcast. Today, we will be discussing durophagy.
Durophagy, what's that mean?
This means when you eat hard stuff.
Yes, the term duro, like durable, eating of tough materials.
Yep, it's a very straightforward definition with a lot of weird ways to do it. So we will be discussing the diversity of durophagy this episode. This can include eating things like shelled things, nuts, also bones, which is often in its own category of osteophagy, but we're going to rope it in here because they overlap so much.
Yes, the secret subheading of this episode. It's a side topic.
Yes. We'll go through what some of the adaptations are for creatures to be able to eat tough foods, why you'd want to eat tough foods, and what the fossil record of durophagy looks like. This is a very interesting topic. I love these kinds of diet and adaptation-focused topics. And we'll be discussing it because it was requested. Both durophagy and osteophagy was requested by Stuart, Michael, Science Skink, and Joe.
Thanks, everybody. This is a really fun topic to talk about. So this was a great suggestion.
Yes, thank you all. Before we get into that, and before we get to the news, some quick announcements. As always, first and foremost, we have a Patreon.
Sure do.
Our Patreon funds the podcast top to bottom. The support from you all patrons helps us do everything we do here on the podcast. It also gets you a bunch of cool goodies like extra info from us, extra episode content, extra time with us, live streams, and at certain levels, it will get you shout-outs here on the podcast, like so. We would like to welcome some of our recent patrons, Jesse, Blythe, Noah, and Sandy.
Thank you, and welcome to all of our new patrons, old patrons, future patrons. That could be you.
Absolutely. If you are curious to become a patron, check down in the description for a link. Also among the description, you'll find a link to our website where you will find that we have a mailing address. We recently got some really cool mail from Holly, who made us custom sculpted croc and snake mugs.
They're so cool.
They're so cool. I'm obsessed with the eye of the croc on mine. And the snake head sticking off of yours is so awesome.
Yeah, the snake is designed to wrap around the mug, and the handle is part of the body of the snake. Yeah. We'll put pictures up on the social media so people can see it. They're so cool.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Holly, for those.
Thank you so much. Thank you also for your description of how you made the mugs.
Yeah.
Which is a bunch of added detail that was very cool to read.
Yes, absolutely. I've always thought pottery and glazing is such a cool science and such a cool art. So very cool. If any of you are curious to send us stuff or send mail our way, you'll find that on the site. Our next announcement has to do with the fact that it is now no longer Croc and Snake Month.
It is not. We have bid adieu once again to another year of great Croc and Snake Month. We did all sorts of cool, fun content. We had the Discord stuff up. We did our patron stuff. It was tons of fun.
We got a ton of people who signed up for the Croc and Snake and Croc tier on Patreon. So we will actually be able to make $500 donations to all three of the organizations, the Crocodile Research Coalition, the Save the Snakes, and Turtle Survival Alliance. And on top of that, the Mayflower Enterprises that was going to match up to $1,000 decided that they will instead match $500 each as well.
Amazing.
This is such an amazing Croc and Snake Month. We are going to actually be able to make some really decent donations to these organizations.
Incredible. We have it is such a fantastic feeling, not only that we got all the engagement and the interaction and the support for our Croc and Snake Month, our ridiculous summer thing that we do, but also the knowledge that we are legitimately donating a what feels like a meaningful amount of money to these conservation organizations. And we're able to do that thanks to our fans. And again, one last shout out and thank you to Mayflower Enterprises for matching this year. That is so cool. That's such a cool way for us to support these animals that we spend all this time talking about and so little time actually interacting with.
It's amazing. Thank you to everyone. Thank you, Mayflower Enterprises. This has been. I am blown away by how amazingly this year's Croc and Snake Month went. So thank you all around.
Yeah, now we got to do better next year.
Yep.
Well,
I'm just setting the bar ever higher. Since it is a new month, that means that it is time for a new Spotlight episode. There'll be a new episode of our Spotlight 2024 series coming out shortly after this episode, so keep your ears out for that. And at the end of the month, we will be also getting ready for DragonCon.
We're going back.
Yeah! We're heading back to DragonCon this year. We will be doing some panels. We've got our preliminary schedule, but it's not finalized yet, so we won't announce it yet so that it doesn't get changed and cause confusion. But there are some good ones on the docket thus far, so if those don't change, there should be some great panels this year. So if you're there, come and see us.
Yeah, preliminarily, we should be on panels where we get to talk about paleontology, speculative evolution, video game stuff. All sorts of science versus movies is coming back this year. There's a whole bunch of cool stuff that we are preliminarily on the schedule to do. And before the end of the month comes up, hopefully we'll have the official list of times and places for everything.
Yeah, so we'll update as that gets updated. But if you're going to be around, let us know or come and find us. We'd be so happy to see you.
Yes. Oh, hey, one more announcement before we get into the meat. Listeners may have noticed this is episode 197, which not only is a preposterously large number that we have been doing this podcast for so long, but we are only a few episodes away from the milestone of 200.
Yeah, we are.
Now, years ago, when we hit 100, we put out a call to our listeners to suggest what topic they think would be fitting for episode 100. We are not putting out a similar call this year because our audience has already spoken. This year's episode 200, the topic will be the most requested topic in the history of the podcast. I'm not going to tell you what it is because that's the game that we play. The most requested topic in the history of the podcast. That's episode 200. You have that to look forward to.
So you can see if you can guess what that topic would be and see if you're right in a couple episodes.
It's gonna be tons of fun. It's gonna be a great one.
Oh, I'm very excited for it. And with that, we can wrap up our announcements and move on to the first section, the news. Every episode, we like to gather some recent research in science involving evolution, paleontology, Earth history, and the like to help us all keep up to date with what's going on. David, what's the news?
I'm going to start us off. Listen, I'm not yet ready to say goodbye to Snake Month. And in fact, we are a little behind the scenes insights. We are recording this. It is still Snake Month. And the day that we are recording this, we have not left Snake Month just yet. So I've got news about snakes. This is
fair enough.
Start off with a bit of news about a new species of snake. This is a new species of booid snake. So very timely in following up last episode where we talked about boas and pythons. This is research by Jasmine Crowan et al. In the Zoological Journal of the Linnaean Society. And in the blog post after this episode, we will put a link to a press release in Sci News. This is a new genus and species of fossil snake. It has been named Hibernophus breithaupti. It comes from the White River Formation, which is a pretty famous fossil locality in Wyoming, dating to the Oligocene epoch around 34 million years ago. These fossils are exciting and exceptional for a number of reasons. Right off the bat, as we've discussed before, most snakes in the fossil record are known from isolated vertebrae. That means we find a single vertebra or maybe like a pile of vertebrae. We tend not to find chunks of spinal column or like whole skulls. It tends to be one vertebra at a time. This new genus and species is in this paper described from 4 nearly complete articulated skeletons.
Wow.
Articulated meaning the bones are mostly in position. They are still in the shape of a snake skeleton.
Yes, which is fantastic.
Very cool. One of those is exciting. This is 4 of them. These are specimens that were previously, they described it as informally assigned. So they had been given names, but it sounds like not really studied in a lot of detail. They were assigned to the genus Ogmophis and Calamagrass, which are fossil genera that are generally thought to be relatives of the North American boa group that includes rubber boas and rosy boas. So this is a group of small, they're generally small, squat, boid snakes.
Yee.
This study takes a close look and finds that the vertebrae, which are usually used to identify those other genera, are distinctly different, as are the skulls and jaws, with a bunch of features that allow them to identify a new species. Again, Hibernophis brighthaupti. Their phylogenetic analysis suggests that it is closely related to all other booids. So boas, and then their close cousins, the rubber boas, the rosy boas, the dwarf boas, things like that. This new one is a close cousin of all of those. So possibly like one step out from true booids. Although they also mentioned that it's possible, a reasonable interpretation could also be that it's a little closer to modern day rubber boas and rosy boas and the New World dwarf boas. So somewhere at the base of this booid family tree where we've got a bunch of these sort of small boas here in the Americas.
Cool.
These findings are very exciting. For one, new insights into the early history of the booid lineage. They point out that there is sort of a building evidence that points towards this lineage of snakes possibly starting out as small, somewhat, at least some of them burrowing snakes. So that may be sort of how this lineage got started. Also, finding this in North America from an early time period might mean that North America was an important part of the geographic history of this group of snakes. Also, this was a point they made in the paper that I was very happy to see. One of the trickiest things about identifying snakes from the fossil record is when we have a single vertebra, we're trying to distinguish the vertebra species to species, but vertebrae also change from the head to the tail. And it can be tricky to tell, these two vertebrae, is this 2 different snakes? Is this 2 different parts of the skeleton? Because there are 4 full skeletons, this species is now known from a great reference to show us how those vertebrae vary over the length of the snake skeleton, which is very cool.
Oh, very good point. Yeah, this is a Rosetta Stone of snake backbones.
Yes, especially for this particular species. Mm-hmm. Also, there's a bunch of different sizes in the specimens, which might be different life stages. And the most exciting part, the part that gave the snakes their genus name, these 4 skeletons were found in sort of curled up positions in close association with each other, which the authors point out could be that now it's possible that these were just buried in the same place for some reason or another, but it's also possible that they were buried together, having been curled up and grouped together like we see some snakes do these days.
Yeah.
Especially during colder months where they get together in an area that we'll call a hibernaculum, that snakes will sort of overwinter in a big cluster, especially things like garter snakes in northern parts of North America. So if that's what we're seeing, this would be the first record of that in the snake fossil record. Fossil evidence of snakes possibly hanging out in a little cluster, potentially for overwintering.
Oh, cool. I don't know that. I'm not surprised that's not a common thing for us to have found. I don't know. I would have expected that to be the first time, just since that's not there's a number of snakes that are known to do that. So I would have assumed that was a common thing that was happening among ancient snakes as well.
Yeah. I think if I remember correctly, they had a line in the paper that said, if this is the correct interpretation of what we're seeing, it would be the first definitive evidence of reptile social behavior in the fossil record.
Wow.
Which I assume they're excluding dinosaurs. And like,
yes,
I assume they mean modern reptile groups, because we've got that for like dinosaurs and pterosaurs. But yeah, among lizards, turtles, crocs, snakes, we get very little, if any, direct evidence of social behavior.
Cool. Oh man, that's it. As we always point out, when we find a spectacular fossil, not only is it exciting because they're pretty and they're just cool looking, but it almost always opens up a whole bunch of opportunities for either study or understanding the organism that wasn't there before, because having the full skeleton is a fundamentally different situation.
Yes.
And it really can open up new ways to observe and learn about this animal. So cool.
And we just get so preciously few complete snake skeletons in the fossil record.
Mm-hmm.
Any one is fantastic. This is 4, which is incredible.
Awesome. That's very cool.
Yeah, still Snake Month going strong.
Well, my news does not continue Snake Month, and is in fact about things without arms and legs finding a way to walk.
That's the opposite of snakes.
Yep. These are mud skippers. These are the least snaky fish. This is a study about the adaptations that are seen in mud skippers for movement on land, and the unique ways they've adapted to the gravity they now have to deal with out of the water. This is research by Fabian Zadi-Kunzli et al. In the Journal of Anatomy, and the article is a press release on EurekAlert. Those links will be in the description, in the blog post. This research was looking at the barred mud skipper, specifically in Okinawa. These are little fish known from the mangrove forests there. Mud skippers in general as a group are amphibious fish that can leave the water for long periods of time. They are much more adept at moving around on land than other fish, that like the walking catfish and stuff like that. These can actually climb mangrove roots and really move around. They can breathe through their skin as long as it's moist. They'll also gulp air to absorb it through the skin of their mouth and the gills inside. So they are very adept out of water fish, but they still have fish-like fins and tails. They don't have the lobed fins of our tetrapod ancestors like coelacanths and lungfish. They don't have those bony limbed fins that the ancestors of 4-limbed animals had. So it's a different way of coming onto land. And this research was wanting to look at what exactly has happened in these fish to adapt to land, and how much could it tell us about the evolution of moving out of the water.
Interesting.
This is also long overdue, because they said the last in-depth study was in the 1960s. So they've not been looked at in detail for quite some time, and now we have much more updated techniques. So they used micro CT scans of the fish, as they said, non-invasive dissection, to be able to get a really detailed look at the tissues of the fins, the propulsive fins. So that's the pectoral and pelvic fins, which are typically your front and back fins, but on mud skippers, the pelvic fins are under the pectoral fins. They're right there on the chest.
Interesting. For double the propulsive power.
Yeah, when they kind of use their pelvic fins as a little stand as they move themselves with the pectoral fins.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Then they have their caudal fin with a tail fin that they will use to flick themselves around when they're wanting to move, to jump or to get out of the way fast or go after food. They imaged mud skippers and their relatives, but they also imaged other fish like zebrafish that are distinctly not related to mud skippers, that are just aquatic fish, to try to get a comparison. And I liked this one note that was in the press release, that to actually do this research, they had to take all these images, then sort through them all individually. And they said that they've been working on this analysis since 2019, basically. It is a very long process to go through these kinds of scans, which is this is a super impressive to me.
Pre-pandemic project.
Yeah. This revealed a number of unique adaptations in the mud skipper that seem to be related to their life out of water. First off, and probably you would have guessed this, the muscles of their pectoral fins are bigger than a swimming fish.
Makes sense.
They've got to do push-ups and move themselves around. This is also true of the overall shoulder girdle. So they just have stronger fins and shoulders than your average fish. This is because when they move, they use a movement called crutching, where instead of moving the pectoral fins left, right, like we do when we walk with our legs, they move them simultaneously forward and then do a push-up and move themselves forward and then rest on the pelvic fin to then move themselves forward, move the pectoral fins forward again for the next step.
Yeah, more like how
they're doing more of a butterfly stroke.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like more like how a sea turtle moves on land.
Yes, exactly. They also noted a connection between the shoulder and pelvic fins through some kind of joint that is not seen in any of the other fish scanned. So there's some additional support or connection between the pelvic fins and this shoulder girdle. Some of the bone connecting tendons in the pectoral fins have been replaced with fascia tissue, which is the same kind of tissue that's encasing our organs and blood vessels. This is the stuff that keeps your organs in place inside your body.
Mm-hmm.
This could be because it's more stable and gives a stronger hold to the walking muscles and for their movements on land. So it might just be more stable. And that the rays of the fin, so ray-finned fish, the normal fish fin that you think of, has those little thin lines that run along the inside of the fin that give it its support. Those are kind of the bones of the fin, even though they're not a bony limb like we think of with coelacanths and lungfish. Those are similar bony material. Those rays are different shaped in cross-section. So typical ray fins are crescent shaped all the way along. And so if you were to cut it in half and look at the end, it would be kind of a crescent shape. Theirs at the base is rounded and then slowly transitions into a crescent shape, which they think is very likely for strengthening the rays of the fin to give the fin more support while they're on land.
Yeah, more of a column or a pillar-like shape.
Yeah, absolutely. And they noted that there are similar shapes in the fin ray bones of some fossil fish that are in the lineage of our ancestors to tetrapods.
Interesting.
So this does seem to be something that they have evolved in convergence with other fish that it eventually would lead to land-walking fish. This is very interesting just to understand this fish, but also understanding the soft tissue adaptations that are required to take on your own body weight when out of the water and move around on dry land, or, less underwater land that's still very wet, can be very helpful for us understanding how that might have happened in our ancestors and other fish that left the water, even though they're doing it two very different ways with different body structures. They are still having to adjust the same physical pressures of moving out of the water. So it might help us understand some of the soft tissue adaptations, things that won't fossilize. One of the next steps they want to look at is the larva of mud skippers to see how this develops and see if that can tell us anything about the evolution of these traits in the group, because the larvae are very normal fish-like larvae. Mm-hmm. They don't show any of the land adaptations, but then those things develop as they grow into adulthood.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because we often think about the transition from water to land. With vertebrates, we often frame it as a thing that happened one time, right?
Yes.
The lobe fin fish, Sarcopterygians, gave rise to tetrapods. That happened one time, but the reverse has happened many, many times. Vertebrates from land have moved into the water and become secondarily aquatic. But that's not actually true. There are a bunch of lineages of fish that have become partially terrestrial. None of them have quite made it to tetrapod status, but there are things like mud skippers, like those catfish you mentioned, like what are the ones that climb the waterfalls?
I know this.
Yeah, whatever one those are. If we don't think of it,
are those blennies?
That might be it.
I think it might be blennies.
So there's a bunch of fish that have adapted to be able to move around on land, which not only gives us a really interesting look at what are the common features that show up when you're a fish that moves onto land, but also drives home the point that you made way at the beginning of talking about this news that I thought was a really astute point, which is that we can't just look at modern fish that move around on land as a direct comparison for early tetrapods because they are doing it differently.
Yes.
Like, mud skippers are not moving on land the same way that lobe-finned fish moved on land. We have to be careful about which features we're correlating between the groups.
Absolutely. Like there is definitely convergence happening in the fact that they are leaving the water and their fins seem to be maybe having a similar structure, but they're anatomically they do not look at all like the fish that ancestrally and anciently left the water. They are a very unique group of terrestrial fish.
Yes, it'd be like trying to study sea turtles to understand how whales moved back into the water. You can.
Yes.
You absolutely, there are things that you can learn and compare between the groups, but you do have to keep in mind that they are doing radically different things in some respects.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Well, my next bit of news is about a group of animals that are arguably even less snake-like, and that's people. Specifically, this is in regards to Neanderthals, but it is a thing, one of my favorite things that archaeologists get to do, which is actualistic experiments, which is trying to do the things that ancient peoples might have done to see what happens when you try to do that. This specifically is looking at cooking and food preparation methods as they might relate to Neanderthal culture.
Cool.
This is research by Mariana Nabes, Ana Rufa, and Marina Igreja in Frontiers in Environmental Archaeology, and we will link to an article this time by Laura Bisis in Popular Science. Now, we did a whole episode about Neanderthals, episode 177, where we were joined by Dr. Bridget Alex, who told us all sorts of cool stuff that we know about Neanderthals. We know a fair amount about Neanderthal behavior and lifestyle, especially when it comes to things that they were eating. We know that Neanderthals were hunting their local animals. We have some examples of animal bones with evidence of preparation on them, like butchering marks and cut marks, stuff like that. However, these authors point out that we don't have a lot of evidence about small animals that Neanderthals might have been eating. And that is partially because small animals tend not to fossilize very well, but also because you're less likely to find distinct like butchery marks on a small, because you don't need to butcher a squirrel the same way that you need to butcher, a buffalo or big thing that you're eating.
Yeah, you just skin it and then cook it.
You just take
like
bites out of it.
A fish. Yeah.
So Neanderthals were probably eating small prey, but it's hard for us to study that in the fossil record. So the goal of this study was to get an idea of what sort of evidence and traces might we see from the preparation of small animal remains. So what they did is they experimentally cooked and butchered birds to look for traces in the bodies. Because if you're going to pick an animal that's unlikely to survive the process of food preparation and then fossilizing, birds are the way to go.
Absolutely.
They collected 5 wild birds that had died of natural causes at a wildlife center in Portugal. So we're in the part of the world where Neanderthals lived. The birds included 2 carrion crows, 2 collared doves, and 1 wood pigeon, which they note are at least somewhat similar to birds Neanderthals might have had access to. In the experiment, they defeathered the birds by hand, cooked 2 of them over hot coals, and then butchered all 5, the cooked ones and the uncooked ones, to get a sense of like, we're butchering some raw birds and also butchering cooked remains. And they butchered them with flint flakes, with stone tools. So they tried to like, we're doing it with the tools and materials that Neanderthals would have had access to.
Cool.
It's very cool. There's a great note in the article that was written about this, where one of the authors is quoted as saying, when you do a hands-on experiment like this, you come to recognize challenges you otherwise wouldn't have noted. They point out that butchering something with stone tools is really hard to do. It requires a lot of precision. They note specifically you have to be very precise to make sure you don't hurt yourself, you don't cut yourself with the thing, because it doesn't have a nice handle like a knife that we might use today.
Yeah, it would be like trying to butcher something with a razor blade, where you're just holding the blade.
Yes, exactly. They noted distinct patterns of bone modifications between the raw and cooked butchered bones. They noted that the raw ones, the ones that were butchered raw, have a lot of cut marks and a lot of break marks, especially in the areas where there are tendons that they have to cut through. Like the meat part is easier to remove, but you end up with a lot of cut marks around the tendons.
Yeah.
And they note that some similar marks have been found on birds at some archaeological sites. So this might be something we've already found. The cooked bones they found show no cut marks, because it's just so much easier to get meat off of cooked bone. Like when it's cooked, you just tear it right off. It's way easier to take it apart. They also noted that less bones survived the process. So they a high loss of bone, because cooking makes the bones very brittle. But the bones would show dark stains where they had been burned, where they had been cooked.
Yes.
So they were able to get a preliminary list of traces that you see and patterns that you see on even very fragile small animal bones after the process of food preparation in 2 different ways. They do note that this is meant to be a pilot study. They only looked at 5 birds of 3 species. So this is a pretty limited beginning to an experimental study. They think that in the future, they note that it would be good to look at stuff like feathers or talons, the parts that you don't eat, but that are still getting prepared in that food preparation process. But they're hopeful that this is a baseline for future research and taking a closer look at evidence in the archaeological record to see if we see some traces like this.
Cool. That's very, very cool. And like you said, it is so fun and fascinating that they get to do that sort of stuff when studying Neanderthals.
You can't really do that with like snakes. I can't do a study where I'd go out and just squeeze rabbits to see, I'm this is an actualistic snake experiment.
And like, even though we can do like physical tests for some, like, using bones or like, bite strength stuff, we don't get to do it. We have to do it like with we have to build a robot of the animal or get one of the animals to do it.
Yes.
A modern relative. But like with Neanderthals, we get to do it. And there's, like they were saying, there's something very relatable and personal and intuitive about that aspect, because it's like when you're learning a new skill in our day-to-day lives of like, until you actually start doing mechanic stuff, you don't start to realize that, that's why having an oil rag is so important, or having these tools around, because you're not doing it. So you're not encountering those little nuances that you can now go, it would make sense for Neanderthals to be doing this because we had trouble with that every time we did it.
Yes.
So I bet they had a solution to it, or they had a similar reaction to it. And that's very cool. And that also cool way to find potential clues on how to identify Neanderthal food.
Yeah. I don't know if they said anywhere if they then got to eat the food. I assume
Yep.
they cooked it. Presumably they then
Yeah.
cooked the raw pieces that they hadn't
Yep.
cooked. I hope somebody got
the
to
only
eat
question
this food.
is if depending on how the birds died, I guess would be the
That's
question.
true. It was
If they were
listed
sick,
as
then you
natural causes. But
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure, I assume it was listed as they died of natural causes to specify that the researchers did not go out and kill the birds to then
Yes, exactly.
Use them for the study.
Exactly. Which very often natural causes either means age or illness.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, maybe you don't want to eat those birds.
Because the only other natural causes is something else killed you, which then usually you don't have a nice body left over.
Yes.
The only things that usually leave a nice body are age or illness.
Well, then
neither of those are ideal for eating.
I hope some lucky dogs
Yeah,
or some bear or something got to eat those birds.
the dogs that they were the wolves they were also testing domestication on.
Yes, that they were training them to go catch birds to bring them back to the oven.
It's might as well do two actualistic studies at once. We're going to start domesticating these wolves with these birds we butchered. That's so cool. Well, speaking of food, this is a semi-segue. My news is about a Cambrian arthropod with a taco-shaped shell, is how it's described in many of its descriptions.
Right, we got there.
Yeah,
197 episodes in. Every now and then the segues are a little shaky.
Yeah, because come in with some duct tape on it. This is research by Alejandro Izquierdo Lopez and Jean Bernard Caron in the Proceedings of the Royal Society of Bee Biological Sciences. The article is by Margarita Basai in Smithsonian Magazine. This research is looking at a particular question in the evolution of arthropods, specifically the group the mandibulates, which are arthropods with mandibles. So if you think of like ant mouth parts, those are mandibles. This includes everything from myriapods, which are your millipedes and centipedes, to pancrustacea, which is modern crustaceans and insects. So most arthropods you're familiar with nowadays fall within the mandibulates, but that wasn't always the case. And the evolution of these structures is a bit unclear just due to poor preservation of those fine, detailed face structures of Cambrian arthropods, which is when the group almost surely evolved. One group that it is likely looked at as one of the early members leading to the mandibulates is the Hymenocarians. This is a Cambrian group of bivalved arthropods. So they've got kind of this two-shelled structure thing going. They have similar features to mandibulates, but it's not enough. It's not super well understood across most of the group, so it's not clear what their relation is. They include a group called the Odoriids, which includes Odoria alata, which is a well-known fossil from the Burgess Shale that has also been looked at as a potential member in the close to the mandibulate group. Odoria is a decently sized Cambrian arthropod. It's about 20 centimeters long, 8 inches long.
Well, pretty big for the Cambrian.
Not bad. One of the larger things swimming around back then. It had a large head with big eyes, a rudder-shaped tail, so it was likely a swimming species. Its head shield curls around the body, that taco-shaped shield that they were talking about, and kind of encases its body in almost a tube-like shape, but it open on one side, and also encloses most of where the legs would be.
Okay, so you would say that it's more of a hot dog than a sandwich.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely in that side of things, of the Venn diagram. It has been suggested that this shape was likely important for how it captured food, but exactly what that mechanism is hasn't been known, which is notable because this fossil has been known for over a century. The two main questions that they've had about the Odoria is, does it have mandibles and how did it feed? This study is on some better specimens a reanalysis of many specimens that hadn't been looked at, and some of which have highly preserved details, and answer these questions. They looked at around 150 fossils of Otoraya
Wow.
and found some really nice detail of the facial features and limbs, and found that indeed they do have mandibles.
Ooh.
So they are mandibulate, or at least very close to the mandibulates. They are lined with tiny teeth, as well as some sort of trident-shaped tooth-like structure in between the jaws. These mandibles definitely seem homologous with other Cambrian groups and modern mandibulates. So it definitely seems like these are true mandibles. So this would make it one of the earliest mandibulates we know of now. It also gives us some suggestion about what the ancestral mandibulate face and head structure might have been like, because it has a limbless section on the head, because the mandibles are basically specialized limbs. Otoraya has a limbless section, which must have retained some plasticity to re-express limbs later in Pancrustacea, because nowadays that section is not present, but it seems like it's likely the ancestral form lacked limbs on that section.
Interesting.
Yeah. They also were able to see more than 30 pairs of legs,
Whew.
all covered in large spines and spikes and smaller spikes that interlock to make kind of a fishnet-like structure, which is supporting what had been suspected by many before, that Otoraya is a filter or suspension feeder.
Interesting. So it's just got like a rows of spines that filter stuff out of the water.
And it could have likely been doing something that we see in lots of like shrimp and prawn today, where they move water through their limbs. They create a current to bring water to their limbs and then filter out food particles. And that shell might have been helping funnel the water into those legs.
Oh, that's cool. Episode 180, we talked about a variety of different ways that animals filter feed.
Yes, this is awesome because it confirms how Otoraya fed, which has been a question about that weird shell and just this animal in general. It is morphological evidence of suspension feeding in a larger Cambrian organism, which is notable for the ecosystem and gives us more info about the relationship between animals and plankton, the planktonic environment of the Cambrian, and just the overall food web of the oceans at that time. This is showing that there were larger individuals moving up off the seafloor, because this is a swimming individual, and filter feeding. So there was enough plankton to support larger organisms at this time.
Well, it's also an early example of a trend that we see over time, which we talked about in episode 180, of large-bodied animals being adapted for filter feeding or suspension feeding. And again, this animal is like 8 inches long, but at the time, that was a pretty large-bodied animal.
Yes, that is very true. And it's just such a neat animal. They suspect that it likely would have been doing this upside down just due to the posture of the animal and the anatomy, that probably that's how it would have been moving around.
Cool. So not dissimilar to another filter feeding animal we have today, flamingos, which also feed upside down.
Yep. There's also things like triops, what are they? The something shrimps. I can't remember what they're called.
The dinosaur shrimps.
The dinosaur shrimps.
I think
those ones that can come, their eggs can hatch from dry dirt. They often will like do these little backflips when they filter feed. These little barrel rolls, but swimming upside down and in a circle. They also noted though that Otoraya does have very large eyes, and its rudder-shaped tail, meaning that it would have been an actual swimmer, not just floating through the water, might have meant that it might have also been a active predator in a way. So it might have been doing a bit of both filter feeding and pursuit or active predation. So it might have been kind of a mixed predator, a mixed feeder. So yeah, just a very cool look at an animal we've known about for a long time, but also potentially helping us fill in the evolution of a key point and key feature of arthropod evolution.
Very cool. It makes me wonder if, because you have a powerful swimmer that's also a suspension feeder, which makes me think about modern whales and big, like,
Yep.
basking sharks and stuff, which makes me wonder, was this an animal that was moving between spots? Would it,
Yeah.
like whales will migrate today between where it's good to raise their young and where there's a lot of food at different times of the year? Were these animals powerful swimmers because they had to travel, for them, long distances?
Or were they filtering like basking sharks and right whales where they just held their arms in a net shape and they weren't kicking them like a shrimp does and just swimming through the water and the
Yeah.
shell funneling water through?
Yeah.
They might have been a ram filter feeder.
Very,
Very
cool.
neat.
Also, they could have been escaping from predators because there were also big things at that time.
Yes, absolutely. So they might have had a get up and go tail
Would
that
have
just got them out of trouble.
would have been pretty tough to eat one of those things.
Well, it's which is a perfect segue.
See, we did. We brought it back. We're back on the segue train.
As we move into our main topic, we can start talking about durophagy and what it takes to eat tough prey, and what are some of the animals that engage in durophagy. Stay tuned. As is so often the case with topics like this, let's start with some definitions.
I love definitions.
Yep. Let's define these terms. Luckily, these terms are pretty darn straightforward. These are fairly simple verbiage that then get very complex in the way they diversify. Durophagy is eating tough stuff.
Yes, we've used this word a lot on the podcast.
It is a very common feature among animals, and all it means is eating tough food. That could be tough armored food or bones, which is why osteophagy is going to be included in the discussion, or even like nuts and tough plants.
Yes. Or even tough plant tissues.
Exactly. Like tough parts of a thing. If you're eating something that would typically be harder to eat, then it's durophagy. That's all it means.
Yes. Duro, like durable.
Yes, exactly.
Hard, durable, sturdy things.
Yes. Osteophagy is eating bone.
Like osteo.
Osteo.
Which means bone.
Yep. So this just means eating of durable things and eating of bone. Chewing on bones, cracking bones. There's various degrees of bone eating, so it's not all one for one.
There are also other terms like granivory for eating seeds.
Yes.
There's a bunch of these sort of sub-terms that are part of or related to the broader umbrella of durophagy.
And there's definitely things that you will see much more commonly referred to as durophagous behavior. Like shelled prey is the typical go-to. You're eating something that has defensive shelly armor.
Right, like a snail or something like that.
That's the go-to example, but you'll find tons of studies talking about durophagous features for eating other things. So it is not a specific category, it's just a more general concept that then can get broken down into many smaller groups. Durophagy and osteophagy don't always overlap directly, but since bones are hard food, it kind of always falls under so not all durophagy is osteophagy, but basically all osteophagy is technically durophagy. Before we get into the diversity, let's talk a little bit about the costs and benefits, because these can seem like weird things to do at a glance. Why eat hard stuff? If it's hard to eat, why eat it?
Eat something else.
Yeah, exactly. Eat something that's not hard to eat.
Yeah, meat. There's meat and like leaves and stuff everywhere.
That are much easier to process, and why we see more animals eating those things than specializing in eating these tough things. For durophagy, the main benefit that's going to come up is the fact that you are able to eat something that most everyone else can't.
Right.
It's giving you access to a food source, a nutrient source, that's not going to be as picked over necessarily or as competed for, because you might be one of only a handful of organisms in the environment that can crack the snail shell or get through that nut husk. So that specialization might open doors to new avenues of food that otherwise would be unavailable to weaker jawed or less robust feeders, which can also then give you options for like getting to food at times that other foods might not be available. So if you have this option to take on hard food, when the good, easy stuff is lacking, the tough stuff might remain.
Mm-hmm.
It does have the cost of the fact that typically you're gonna need some special tools. Special tools or behaviors are going to be required to get through this tough stuff. That's the whole reason it's there, is that it's a pretty good defense for the everyday. So you have to go a step beyond that to actually now be able to get around that defense. With osteophagy, it is not nearly as requiring of specialization as often. There's a ton of non-specialized osteophagous animals. The go-to example are herbivores.
Mm-hmm.
Chewing on bones is a very, very common behavior in a lot of, especially like ruminant herbivores, like cattle and deer and your antelopes and just your horned and antlered herbivores very commonly are seen chewing on bones. It's been noted in both domestic and wild individuals and populations. Most likely, the reason, and from what we can tell, is to get nutrients.
Yes, bones are full of minerals and stuff.
Exactly. Specifically, phosphorus and calcium are the things that it seems like are most often what animals are going for when they chew on bones. These are things that are going to be lacking in plant material. So if these are herbivores, that makes sense because they're not going to be getting as much of it, while carnivores are going to have a better chance to get it from eating other animals.
Yes, it makes sense that if you want to grow strong bones, you can get it just straight from the source.
Yep. Absolutely. Eat bone. These kind of browsing and grazing herbivores aren't the only ones. Rodents are extremely famous for chewing on bones.
Yep. If you like go out walking in the woods and you find like a deer bone or just a bone out there, it is extremely likely you will see little scrape marks, especially on the edges and the narrow parts of it, from rodents scraping their teeth against it.
This also can be for nutrients. It also can just be to wear their teeth down.
Yeah, to sharpen their ever-growing front teeth.
It's the same reason if you have a pet mouse or other rodent, you need to give them stuff to chew on because they need to keep their teeth worn or else they will overgrow.
Yes, very much like how a cat needs a thing to scratch.
Yes.
To keep those claws in order.
And bone is a very convenient material that you'll find in the wild.
It's everywhere.
For chewing on. You'll find carnivores that are not super special, like bears and wolves are not super famous bone eaters, but they'll absolutely chew on bone.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a bit more for nourishment than just getting those minerals. They're actually going to be digesting parts of the bone a bit more. So you will see sometimes a difference in the types of bones the two go after. Carnivores will often go after fresher bones. Herbivores will go after dry bone because it doesn't matter if the nutrient has dried out, they want those minerals.
Yeah. If you're getting like at the marrow and lingering bits of protein and flesh and such in there, that's what carnivores are really looking for.
Yes, exactly. So osteophagy is a great way to supplement for a lot of organisms.
And then, of course, just because we're on the tail end, we're following up for Croc and Snake Month, there are animals that just eat things whole.
Yes, absolutely.
And just end up getting bones as well.
Absolutely.
But we don't think of, like, crocs as being bone eaters. They're just everything eaters.
A lot of your birds that swallow down prey are going to have to deal with bones. Some digest, some cough it up.
Some spit them back up.
So eating bone is a very, very common behavior. There are dangers, so to speak. You're chewing on a hard thing, and if you are a non-specialized herbivore, tooth damage and wear is something that is notable in a lot of these herbivores that chew on bones.
Yeah. Also, you're going to be swallowing shards of bone and hard stuff, which can be damaging to the insides.
And so you'll see varying degrees. I think a lot of the herbivores, it's more like mouthing a mint, where you're just kind of chewing on it. You're
like
not
a hard candy.
Yeah, you're not fracturing it and swallowing the bits. You're just wearing it down and using it kind of like a lozenge.
Yeah.
More like a salt lick than...
Yeah. It's like a little jawbreaker vitamin.
Yep. One paper described them as you'll see it sticking out of their mouth like a cigar because they are just kind of on one end of it.
Yeah.
The predators you'll often see are cracking into it.
Yes.
Which is a great segue to start talking about some of the specializations we see for durophagous and osteophagous diets. There are a ton of ways animals can get at these things. By far, the most common one you'll come across are specialized bites. Typically, strong, crushing bites. Which makes sense. If you're going to eat something hard, crunch into it. You need to be able to bite harder than it is, and now you can eat that food. This is an extremely common feature. We see it in all sorts of... Basically, every group of animals has at least a member that just is a hard-biting nutcracker of an animal and can bite through tough food. You know, parrots are famous for having strong beaks. There's tons of fish that have durophagous bites. Parrotfish crunch into coral. Pufferfish are probably the most famous example, where they have these tooth plate-like beaks in their mouths, and they just can take bites out of a lobster. Like, not crunch up the lobster, just bite out of the lobster and then leave like a cookie bite out of it. We'll find those tooth plates in the fossil record as well, so like they've been doing this for a long time. Another famous group for this, there are sharks that do it, but the rays that have these pavement-like teeth.
Yes, I'm familiar with those because of fossils.
Yep.
You'll find these slabs of ray teeth.
And so eagle rays, cow-nose rays are famous for this. Other rays have lesser, like southern stingrays have flattened teeth. You know, they're still sharp and grippy. They're just laying down, so they're able to kind of chew on the front of it. So they can still crush stuff up, but you get stingrays that literally just have flat pavement-like teeth on their upper and lower jaws that they can just
mashers
grind and mash shells up with. Probably the most famous example in mammals is going to be the hyena.
Absolutely. Episode 109.
So we won't go into a ton of detail because we did a whole episode on it.
Sure did. And it was great.
Yes.
That was such a cool episode.
Hyenas have short, stout, thick jaws, robust heads, full of muscle with these just honkin' premolars.
They are so, like the carnassials, the specialized shearing molars / premolars in carnivorous mammals. Putting a hyena next to basically any other animal in that group is ridiculous. Those teeth are monstrous.
They've also moved those blade-like teeth to the very, very back of the jaw, so it's emphasizing the highest pressure point on the fulcrum of the jaw, so they can exert the highest bite possible for their mouth. They are one of the strongest bites to body size. There are others, like the Tasmanian devil has even slightly higher. There are other bone-crunching mammals, like wolves absolutely can crunch bone. They're just not nearly as specialized. You'll see actually a lot of similar features to the hyena in animals like giant pandas.
Oh, yeah.
Which are crunching on bamboo, which is a very tough food.
Yes.
And they have a very short, robust skull with increased musculature, robust and stout teeth.
Yeah. The skull of a giant panda and the skull of a hyena have a lot in common.
Yeah.
Also, gorillas have a very similar skull structure because they're eating very tough plants.
Absolutely. So you'll see plant eaters, bamboo eaters. One paper was specifically looking at bone crunchers and bamboo eaters and all the similarities between those. But a lot of herbivores that are going to be going through really tough vegetation have to have similar adaptations because they're eating tough food.
Yeah, we talked in episode 173 when we talked about herbivores about how certain groups throughout history seem to evolve durophagy as a stepping stone towards herbivory.
Yeah, because
that going from eating meat to eating plants often has an intermediate stage of eating tough stuff.
Because on average, plants are harder than meat.
Yeah, plants are hard to eat.
Yeah, they've got
cell walls. That's why you shouldn't be chewing on grass.
Yeah, so it makes sense that if you want to start chewing on plants, you need to bolster your biting apparatus. Another favorite example of this kind of biting is the caiman lizard.
Yes. Oh, I love these.
Yep.
I love caiman lizards. They're so cool. Their skulls are so cool.
They have these pebble-like teeth for crunching up snails.
Like a row of rocks. The teeth look like just you lined up some rocks in the mouth.
They're not the only lizards with strong crunching bites. Tegus are famous for having snail crunching bites, but the caiman lizard's by far the most extreme when it comes to their teeth. I found one paper noting that they eat in a very particular way, where they'll grab the snail, raise their head so it gets back into the joint of the jaw where it will have the most pressure, crack it, and then spend some time processing it as they use their tongue to flick out the shell pieces.
Oh, cool.
And so they end up removing the shell. They're very selective, it seems.
And this is an interesting note that some animals, like we alluded to before with the birds, Some animals are just swallowing the hard stuff that they're dealing with. Others are cracking through it, leaving as much of the hard part behind to get at the part that they can actually digest and deal with.
Like when we eat a nut, we don't just smash it and then swallow all the pieces. We then pick through to get to the good bit in the middle and eat that. So you get varying degrees. Some, like a crocodile, is just going to crunch, 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 and then swallow.
Yep.
And that's it. Others might be a bit more selective with what they're actually going to swallow. There are other ways, though, to specialize your bite for eating tough stuff. I found a paper talking about the fact that many squamates, lizards and snakes, that eat tough food have gotten around a particular issue with eating hard food, which is that when you bite down, your mouth is closing from the back to the front like a pair of scissors, and that a tough prey item could just slide along that fulcrum and be pushed out the mouth.
Like if you try to pick something up small with forceps or something, and it just shoots out the end of it.
The example they gave that of is like trying to cut a pencil with a pair of scissors.
Yes.
It just rolls the pencil out.
That's a way better, like more relatable analogy, because I've done that a bunch of times.
Every single person at some point in elementary school tried to cut a pencil and just went, why is this so hard?
Why is it so hard to do?
It's because it's the wrong shape for the wrong thing.
If you haven't tried that, we encourage you to go ahead and do it.
Yep.
Enjoy.
They have come up with ways to get around that issue and to hold on to tough prey by giving themselves more grippy bites. Many lizards do this by having more mobile heads, upper jaws that can hinge separate from the brain case, so they can wrap around the prey.
Yeah, the jaw actually bends around the shape of the food to some degree.
Yeah, so their snout is hinged and I know geckos, some of them have this.
A lot of lizards have extra hinging in their upper and lower jaws.
There are snakes that also will have hinged maxilla, the upper jaw bone, but also will have specialized dentition for grabbing onto prey. That is tough. This is often going to be things like heavily scaled lizards that they need to hold on to while they either envenomate or, wrestle with them. One group that I saw noted were the mock vipers, which have large teeth up front, then a diastema, so a gap without teeth, followed by smaller teeth, and then a grooved fang that is about the same size as the big teeth up front, which ends up making this like archway of teeth in the mouth for the prey to fit within, and then press up against the fang so that it can envenomate the prey.
Yeah.
Another issue they mentioned with this similar sort of feeding is that going after prey like armored skinks, their scales could catch on teeth and either damage them or end up interrupting the feeding process because they've got these very hard but still shingled scales. And that many a snake that feeds on this kind of skink have developed hinged teeth that will fit, that they're more spatula shaped, flattened, and can fit under the scales but not break on them, not catch on them, and can hinge up toward the jaw so that it ratchets the prey backward in the mouth so that it is accounting for these armored scales.
Yeah.
The paper that mentioned that one mentioned that the common wolf snake has both that diastema feature and these hinging teeth.
Going after armored prey.
Yes. So there's other ways to deal with, if you're swallowing the prey whole, you don't need to crush it per se, but you do have to hold on to it, and armor's slipperier. So having other ways to deal with that have come up. But smashing's by far the most common solution.
Sure.
But you don't necessarily have to do it by biting. Lots of animals have found other ways to smash open prey. Probably the most famous and first one that comes to mind is tool use.
Yes.
Same way we deal with durophagous prey. We just use a tool.
Yeah, we have a nutcracker. I don't bite a chunk out of a lobster.
No.
I have stuff to help me with that.
I have a lobster cracking tool.
Yes.
We see a number of animals that use tool use this way. Monkeys and apes are the first ones that often come to mind. There are bearded capuchin monkeys that one study found they use rocks to hammer nuts and crack them open, but they actually found that they're very, very careful about the way they do it. They moderate the speed and number of times they hit so that they just crack it as much as need be. It's not this repetitive boom, 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 until it's smashed.
Right. There is an intentionality to it.
There's a finesse. They are cracking the nut, nothing more.
Yes, I'm sure many of us, I know I have experienced cracking something too hard.
Oh, yeah.
You try to crack a nut and you just demolish it, or you shoot it across the room.
Now I've got the first step to peanut butter.
Yes.
It's just paste. Chimpanzees also use rocks to smash nuts. One paper I found noted that the dings and dents on the rocks can actually differentiate different groups of chimpanzees in the technique and the like specific pattern they use.
That's cool.
So it's got a similar thing to like stone tools with ancient humans, that the way this is flinted says it's this group. They're the only ones that do it this way. That there's a similar kind of technique thing going on. My favorite, though, are sea otters.
I was going to bring it up if you didn't.
Sea otters. Sea otters, which are kind of a twofer, they have very strong durophagous bites with short, stout skulls, these crushing teeth, and extremely powerful jaw muscles.
Mm-hmm.
So,
don't get bit by an otter.
No, do not. The best way I've always used to explain that is we got in the habitat with every animal at the aquarium, including the gators and sharks, but never the otters.
Yeah.
They never had direct contact with humans unless they were anesthetized. Sea otters are marine predators. They swim down and gather prey from the sea floor and from like kelp forests, bring it up to the surface to feed on it. A lot of the prey, like small mussels and urchins, they just crack into it with their teeth.
Mm-hmm.
They just bite through it. So they have a bite like we would expect for things like hyenas and stuff like that. But then for tougher or larger prey, they also will use stones that they collect to either, as an anvil on their chest, they'll smash the prey against it until it cracks open. Or I found a paper talking about the fact that they'll also use it to remove prey, like abalone that are adhered to a rock. They'll grab a stone and smash it against the abalone until it lets go.
Gotcha.
So they'll also use it as a collection tool.
Interesting.
They are very specialized for this, having favorite rocks and being extremely good at it. It was noting that they can hit like many times a second when they're smashing a thing with a rock. And they have a pouch that is loose skin between their front arms that they can put their prey in, but also keep their favorite rocks.
Just a little rock pocket.
Yeah. So it's just fantastic. Double durophagy technique.
Yes.
I can bite on most things, but when I can't, I've got a rock. Other animals will also use rocks, but the rock is stationary.
Mm-hmm.
They will drop it onto the rock. Many a bird is known to drop tough food items onto hard surfaces to crack it open.
It is one of the most obvious yet rarely directly discussed benefits of being able to fly.
Yeah.
'Cause you just drop stuff.
You're a bombardier now.
Gravity's on your side.
You can just release your payload of food and the ground will take care of opening it.
Yes.
There are tons of examples of this. There's gulls and crows that go after shellfish, mussels, and things like that. There was one study that was very cool talking about crows dropping these mussels and finding that the adults drop it at about the minimum height to crack it the first time, which was established by other experiments that they ran, and that young are less efficient. They haven't quite zeroed in that height.
Yeah, just like the monkeys have a finesse to it, the birds also. Yeah, if I drop it from this high, odds are I'll get it on the first shot.
Yes, which not only is like saving energy, you're being more efficient.
Sure, you don't have to fly up multiple times.
But they also made the point that not going higher than need be probably also reduces the scatter area, that the prey's not going to bounce or scatter as far, which might decrease the chances of kleptoparasitism of another bird stealing it.
Yes, it also it's quicker to get back down to it.
Yes, exactly.
If you weren't as high up.
There are famous cases of crows also dropping nuts onto asphalt.
Mm-hmm.
One example that came up, which I found a paper addressing, was them using cars as nutcrackers, dropping them in like walkways and then letting a car run over it and then going to get the nut afterward.
Mm-hmm.
This paper did a test of that and they found that that does not seem to be true.
Interesting.
Yeah. They said that there's only like 2 observational accounts of that happening. So it's not a thing that's been observed a ton. And when they redid it in the same place it had been observed, they watched crows and noted when did they approach the street with a nut, when did they drop a nut, and was there a car coming or not. And they did not notice any crows more likely to approach with a nut or drop a nut when a car was approaching than when one wasn't. the presence of a car didn't seem to change their behavior at all. So it's more likely they were just using the pavement, and a couple of times cars happened to help.
Yeah, and then they noticed that the thing was open, and they went down and they grabbed
Exactly.
it.
That they weren't actually
sense.
using the car. Which is a bummer, because that was a cool story.
Well, and it's a credit to crows that we all believed it.
Yes.
We were like, yeah, that sounds like a thing a crow would do.
That paper also made that point that, like, crow's intelligence is very lauded, but many of the stories that get shared are often, like, one-off observations. So, like...
Right. A crow did that.
Had a little bit of, like, maybe we should calm down just a little bit on how much we want to attribute to what crows do. But still very cool. There are golden eagles that drop tortoises.
Oh man, it really hits different when it's a vertebrate.
When it's something that if it had vocal cords, could scream. But my favorite for dropping birds are the bearded vulture, the lemurgier. The bearded vultures are mountain scavengers in Africa, Asia, and Europe, but they scavenge specifically on bone.
Mm-hmm.
So unlike other vultures that land near a carcass and then strip it, they are typically going after the bones of the carcass. And small bones they'll just swallow.
Sure.
Just fully, this little wrist bone is just going down the gullet.
Vultures have very efficient digestive tracts. Episode 139 for all about vultures.
But with larger bones, they will grab them and then fly them over rocky areas, which are called ossuaries, drop them and crack them open to then swallow the smaller chunks. All of this ultimately to take advantage of the marrow and nutrients inside the bone. These are by far one of the most osteophagous vertebrates on the planet. They are the only one known whose diet is primarily bone, often making up 70 to 90% of their diet.
Yeah, so this isn't like what you were saying before, a lot of animals eat bone as a supplement.
Mm-hmm.
This is, I eat meat as a supplement.
Yeah. When they presented wild bearded vultures with meat and bone, they chose the bone first every time.
Wow.
So that is what they eat. Hyenas are famous for cracking bone. They still do not actually eat bone as a main item very often. It still takes up a small percentage of their diet.
Right. They'll eat a whole carcass and then go after some bone as like an add-on. Or if they come across a carcass that doesn't have a lot of meat left on it, they'll eat what meat they can and then get into the bone to get some more out of it. But yeah, given the choice, a hyena is going to hunt something and kill it and then eat it if it can.
Yes, and they are preferring the meat.
Yes.
This is a very extreme form of osteophagy, but bone is very high in calorie if you're able to digest it. Having those strong stomach acids that are going to let you do that is important, which we see in a lot of osteophagous animals. Things that are eating bone typically have stronger stomach acids because bone is a bit tougher than squishy flesh. So, yeah, you need something that can dissolve not quite rock, but getting there.
Yes.
Them being able to take advantage of this might actually be giving them a higher, like, mass to calories than going after the meat. So they actually might be doing perfectly fine, which allows them to survive in these high altitude, more sparse environments.
Yeah.
And they're so cool looking.
They're very cool birds.
This is one of my favorite birds, for anyone wondering. Bearded vultures, 10 out of 10. Though, there are still yet other ways to smash. One of the weirdest smashers out there is the mantis shrimp.
Oh, yeah.
This punches its prey open.
Yep. just pow.
Boom!
Knock, knock.
They have these specialized raptorial front limbs, so those folding up kind of like a praying mantis, which is how they get their name. The clubbing or smasher shrimps, there are ones that have more praying mantis style grabbing arms, but the clubbed ones can store energy by flexing muscles and flexing parts of their exoskeleton, that when they unleash those clubs, they hit with the highest force created by a physical movement of an animal. It causes cavitation bubbles at the contact of the organism, which is when you flash fried water to the point that it vaporizes underwater.
Yep.
And there actually is a little bit of light released.
Yep.
And that, believe it or not, is enough to crack a shell.
Yeah, that'll do it. Yeah, they punch shells apart.
And to where they explode just a little bit right at the surface. And that high concentrated release of energy can, usually with a couple of hits, crack open a clam or a crab, it was often thought that this meant that this level of specialization, because that's very extreme anatomy, meant that they probably were mostly eating hard-shelled things.
Yeah.
Studies found, though, that, no, they actually take a lot of soft-bodied stuff, too.
I suppose you could also punch those.
Yeah, exactly. Like
you could punch a fish.
It's, even though they have these super special shell crackers, many were found to have 30 to 50% of their diet be soft-bodied creatures. So they had a fairly generalist diet,
Yeah.
even though they are one of the world's most famous nutcrackers.
Interesting.
So that goes for a lot of these animals, that just because they have this anatomy, hyenas do hunt, they don't just scavenge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the mantis shrimp does take on soft food. It'll take a fish. It doesn't have to have armor for it to eat it.
Yeah.
So just because you have the specializations to eat one doesn't mean that's all you're eating.
Yeah, and this is different from, we talked about herbivores, and herbivores are animals that predominantly eat plants.
Mm-hmm.
We did sanguivores in episode 134, which is animals that eat blood. Durophagy tends to be a thing that an animal can do.
Yes.
It's rare. There's not very often that you have animals that only do that.
Yeah.
Because if you can eat a hard thing, odds are you can also eat a bunch of other types of stuff.
Yeah. Like there are very specialized groups like egg-eating snakes.
Absolutely.
That eggs are tough armored, bird eggs specifically,
Yes.
tough armored food items that they have very specialized anatomy to eat.
Egg-eating snakes have typically no teeth.
Mm-hmm.
They swallow an egg whole, and then there are spines on the bottom of some of their vertebrae that are extra pointy and angled forward, and their throat muscles push the egg back until it reaches those spines, and that pressure cracks the egg, and then they spit up the eggshell.
Which sounds like a scene from a sci-fi movie where we're watching someone being eaten by the alien creature.
And then there's like spikes coming
Yep.
down from the top of the throat. No, that's how egg-eating snakes do it. At least African, Indian, and Japanese egg-eating snakes, there are at least 3 different genera that have those specialized vertebrae. So cool.
And they mainly only eat eggs.
Yeah, they are almost exclusively. There are a lot of snakes that will occasionally
like
grab eggs.
some rat snakes can just grab an egg.
Absolutely. African egg-eating snakes, Indian egg-eating snakes, and I believe Japanese rat snakes are specialized egg eaters.
So you get very specialized durophagous animals, but many of them, like the caiman lizard, still will also just take animals if
Yeah.
it catches a random animal other than a snail. A strong bite is also very good at biting pretty much whatever you want.
Yes.
Like crocs can crack turtles, but they mostly eat fish.
Yeah. A giant panda will grab a little mouse or something that goes by if it can get its hands on it.
Absolutely.
They'll eat them.
So you can have a lot more variety than is sometimes suggested, since it gets focused on them being durophagous and having these adaptations. Often the more diverse behaviors and diets can get kind of overshadowed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we saw the teeth of a caiman lizard, we might be inclined to think it only eats hard-shelled
Sure.
prey.
Well, why else would you evolve such specific anatomy unless that's all you're doing?
Right. Where in reality, it eats a lot of prey, but it is specialized to be able to also take advantage of hard-shell prey that other lizards might not be able to get
It
at.
eats this thing maybe the best, but that doesn't stop it from eating other things.
Yes.
There are less violent means of getting to hard food.
More boring ways.
Non-smashing. The less hulky way to get to food.
A much less Nigel Thornberry
Yes.
way to open your food.
There are durophagous animals that have means to get either through or around the shell in armor of food without having to break it open. Probably the most common is drilling.
Yeah, there are so many animals that drill.
Yep. There are snails, there's cephalopods that will use their beaks or radula, their rough tongue-like structure, to drill a hole. Some of them even use the shell, their own shell, to drill a hole in the shell of other snails, clams, mussels, and then eat them through that hole, pull the food out or digest them and then slurp up the inside.
Yep.
Sea stars will just pry open bivalves. They just put their arms on either side.
Just like opening a pistachio.
Yep.
You just open it.
And the thing I love about them is it's not this like, "Urgh!" It's just It's like when you were messing with, if anyone was an older sibling and had a younger sibling, to where you just keep constant pressure and they're so much smaller than you, they can't do anything. It's like that. They just pull and never let up the pressure. And eventually the muscles just gets tired and it can't hold the shell long enough and it pops open and they force their stomach in, digest it all, and leave a perfectly clean shell behind. Yep.
A lot of horror movie fuel in this episode.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just like the anticipation and the tension building as like the bay doors are slowly, inevitably pried open.
It's the bit from Make Some Noise where they're a pistachio.
Yes.
There's two sides of a pistachio.
You're going to lose us. One of the coolest, though...
That might have been an episode of Game Code. I don't remember which. I don't remember.
That was Make Some Noise.
It was the Noise Boys.
Yeah,
they did it.
I think that was Make Some Noise. One of the coolest, which I have to give you credit for, are snail-eating snakes.
It's awesome.
It's so cool.
I think we talked about this because there was a paper not long ago that described how they do it.
Yep. There are... this paper I was looking at was specifically talking about Southeast Asian snail-eating snakes. There are others from other places and other groups. They feed primarily on snails. They have asymmetric teeth with more teeth on one side of the jaws than the other so that they can grab with one half and then saw the snail with the other. And also have their lower jaws are different so that they can then hook the snail out of the shell with their mobile lower jaws. There are a couple of like tricky aspects to eating snails that they've come up with ways around. Most species are specialized for eating clockwise coiled snails. But with just I think they said it was a single gene flip or very simple genetic flip, snails can reverse the coiling of the shell.
Yeah.
And be born as a counterclockwise coiled shell, which doesn't match up the asymmetry of the teeth.
Yes, you've protected yourself from these snakes.
Yeah. And that means that a snake that usually feeds on one type and encounters the other almost always fails hunting it because it doesn't get the grab right. It tries to bite and the snail just pulls in the shell and now you can't get to it. But snakes that are commonly encountering these reverse coiled snails can recognize the handedness of the snail and will angle their head accordingly and are successful basically every time.
Cool.
So they will learn. They're not quite as effective the other way because their teeth still are specialized for one way, but they can adjust by just reversing their approach.
Yeah. So you just turn the snail upside down.
Right? You need a mirror. There's also some snails that have operculum, which are these shield-like trapdoor covers to their shell.
Yeah, and it's attached to the body of the snail, so they're in the shell, and then they pull in, and their foot has this hard plate at the bottom that then covers up the aperture of the shell.
And it just seals them up perfectly. Like, there's basically no way you're going to get in there other than smashing the whole thing. But even if you catch them before they close up, most of the snakes can't eat these easily because if you swallow that opercula, it will damage the snake.
Yes.
Because they can't
That'll
digest
get stuck
it.
in your throat, it'll pierce something. That's a bad thing to swallow.
So there are ones that have specialized sawing jaws to saw off the opercula.
There are videos of this. If you look online, because I think at least one of the papers came with supplemental videos, and you can watch this snake grabs onto the snail, positions it in the mouth, and then because snakes can move their jaws independently, one of the lower jaws just goes back and forth and slowly saws the operculum off the snail. It is one of the most fascinating and brutal ways to eat an animal that I've ever seen.
It's so cool.
And these are like tiny little snakes.
Yes. The one they were specifically talking about in the paper I found was the blunt-headed snail-eating snake. So look it up because they're also adorable.
They're super cute.
You
wouldn't think that they're like cats.
Yeah, these little
you
Muppet
wouldn't think
faces.
that it's a little monster. Are you going to mention the crayfish-eating snakes?
No, I didn't have that on my list.
If not, I'm going to throw it in right now.
Please do.
There are also snakes that specialize in eating crayfish, but they can't swallow a whole crayfish because there's too much armor and all sorts of stuff in there.
Yeah, it's like trying to swallow a chandelier with just stuff sticking out.
So what these crayfish snakes will do is they'll coil around the body and also coil around the arm and pull.
Yeah!
And just pull the limbs off so that they can swallow the smaller pieces. So cool. very neat processing of hard foods from snakes.
That one's so fun because that is one of the steps we use when we eat crustaceans.
Yes.
Is we don't just go, all right, here's a crab. It's like, no, here's the arms, here's the legs. We've separated them out and then we pop them off and then we crack them open. But like, we do the same thing.
Yeah. I love the dismembering your prey without hands.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, it also feels like something from like a Disney movie.
Yeah, this
using
is how
your coils
Sir
for
Hiss
hands.
would pull things apart. Yeah, that's how they do it.
So cool. One of the weirdest for being osteophagous are bone worms.
Bone worms.
Bone worms. We've talked about these before in the deep sea episode.
Yeah, 128.
These are commonly found on whale falls, where a whale's body has fallen to the ocean floor. Organisms swarm over in and eat all the good bits, and then eventually a skeleton's left. And what you will find is bacteria growing on it, but also this areas of fuzz that looks just now like a shag carpet has grown on the bone. And what it actually is are millions of little ossidax worms that are rooted into the bone and through just releasing acid, slowly dissolving and digesting the lipids and nutrients left in the skeleton.
Yeah, these are osteophagous animals that feed on the bones from inside the bones.
Yeah.
They grow in the bone.
Absolutely. It's like a fungus growing on some food, but these are worms.
Yeah.
This is all they do. They spores drift through the water and land on skeletons.
Talk about specialized osteophagy. This is all they eat and it's where they live.
Yep. There are tons of different species of them that can be found on a single carcass. They have no mouth, no anus, no gut. They're just absorbing nutrients. They have a symbiotic bacteria that helps process that nutrients and then make it usable for the worms. And they are eating bone, but in a very... It is destructive because they're digesting it, but they're not cracking it open. They're just growing on it, and then eventually there will be no bone left.
Yeah.
So it's a very different approach, but it is strict osteophagy.
I feel like you could populate an entire fictional alien ecosystem in a horror movie with monsterified versions of just the animals we've talked about in this episode. So
yeah.
The real life animals, most of the ones we've talked about are like super cute.
Oh, yeah.
Lovely little animals. Not at all dangerous to people because, that's not what they're eating. They're eating, hyenas, watch out.
No, don't go cuddle with a hyena.
And otters.
Yes.
But most of these are not at all in any danger to people. But you could easily scale these things up in a fictional setting, and these would be truly disturbing ways for your protagonist to have to worry about getting eaten.
Oh, man, here's an idea for any DMs out there. Dragons dropping knights onto stones to get through the armor.
Yeah. Your party wakes up and they're covered in fuzz. Like a rust monster, but it's for the armor.
Yeah. And these are such extreme feeding methods. Mm-hmm. To eat extreme food, you have to come up with extreme solutions. So it's just very specialized, very intense, often, ways of feeding. We could go on with example. This is one more so than most episodes where I say this line of we could go on forever. Basically, every group of animals has a durophagous member, and many of them have multiple ones that are fully separately evolved that have different means. The ways animals have figured out how to get around tough food is nearly infinite.
Oh, yeah. They're animals that crack seeds, animals that puncture eggs.
Yep.
There's so many different versions of this.
Weevils that drill holes in nuts. The list goes on and on and on and on.
Yes, please comment wherever you'd like with your favorite examples that we didn't mention.
Absolutely. This is a wildly common thing to have evolved and to evolve on our planet. So, after the break, let's talk a bit about the history of durophagy and how we study it in the past, because it's not just a recent thing. It's been happening since animals have been around. Stay tuned. Durophagy, as we just discussed, is a fairly common thing. But if you Google the term, most of the results you'll get will actually be talking about fossil organisms and marine. Like a lot of the marine, the fish and the rays we talked about are typically the ones that the term gets used for.
Yeah, we've mentioned this term a lot on the podcast, and it almost always comes up in reference to fossils.
Yeah, it's a very commonly used term by paleontologists and discussing the diets of fossil organisms. This is a very useful and important concept when we're studying the past because we find lots of organisms that seem to have dentition or anatomy or features that suggest they were eating tough things. So it's a very clear indicator of at least a portion of their diet and their specialization and their evolution. So it ends up being kind of one of the main categories fossil organisms get sorted into, so to speak.
Yeah, it's one of the, when we're looking in the fossil record, we always have a limited view on the lifestyle or diet or whatever of a fossil animal. And like we said earlier, diet is often very variable. A lot of animals that are specialized durophagous animals aren't just eating hard stuff, but their diet of hard stuff is very easy to see from fossil evidence, like herbivory or carnivore. Sometimes you look at an animal and you go, that thing has saber teeth. Its diet may have been a lot of things. Here's a thing we can say with confidence. That sharp-toothed animal was eating.
Yes.
Durophagy kind of falls into a similar category. It's not the whole picture, but it's something that is often quite easy for us to readily identify in the fossil record.
It's also somewhat unique in giving us a almost one-to-one relation with predator-prey dynamic because durophagous anatomy means armored prey.
Yeah.
So we can often find trends with those two, but it also gives us a indication of who you were eating, and if we find things that have those features in the same habitat, very likely you might have been on the menu for said predator.
Yeah. If we find an animal and we can say this was clearly herbivorous, that right off the bat doesn't tell us anything interesting or unusual about their habitat.
No.
There were plants there.
Yes. This gives us, we know there were probably hard prey, and if we find any of those, we can go, yep, very likely you were on the menu for you, because you're in the right size category and you've got armor and they've got crushing bits. This has been noted also because this dynamic between armored prey and durophagous predator has multiple times driven huge radiation events. It's one of the things that's attributed to the Cambrian explosion that we see armored exoskeletons diversify and then predators for them and the Cambrian explosion.
That's episode 9.
But also the Mesozoic Marine Revolution.
Episode 174.
This is the focus of that we see a increase in shell crushing and drilling predation, as well as armored and subterranean behavior for benthic, bottom of the ocean marine habitats during the Mesozoic. There's this revolution that seems to mostly be driven by this increase in hard food eating predators, durophagous animals, and the response from their prey causing this huge increase in diversity and radiation of behaviors. Major defining event of the Mesozoic.
And like I said, we did a whole episode about the Mesozoic Marine Revolution, 174, so go check that out if you want the details.
Absolutely.
Also the Cambrian explosion.
Yes.
Episode 9, we also did that.
So instead of going into those details, let's talk a bit more. How do we recognize durophagy in the fossil record? Because we often talk about, we found this fossil group, it seems to have been eating hard stuff, and we'll give some examples, but how do you actually determine that they were eating that? And it can be more difficult than you might suspect. I found one paper talking about the fact that even in modern groups, it's often hard to confirm durophagy. Even if it's an animal that looks, it quacks and walks like a durophagous predator, but confirming that it is indeed eating those things can be difficult. You either have to watch it eat those things, which isn't possible with fossil organisms, and even with living ones is sometimes very difficult to do. One study that looked at the gold tegu, which is considered to be durophagous because of its rounded teeth and strong bite and all the things we were talking about with previous animals.
This is a lizard around today.
Yes, exactly. Stomach contents revealed no evidence of durophagy. No shell bits, no signs that it's eating hard stuff. But if, like the came lizard, it's ejecting the shells.
Yeah, we wouldn't see. Well, you're not going to find eggshell in the gut of an egg-eating snake.
Yes, because they spit it back up.
Yep.
So having to find confirmation can sometimes be tricky. So often the goal is to try to use as many lines of evidence as you can, sometimes less direct lines that can give evidence it was taking place. That being said, though, still the most direct evidence is if you find gut contents or coprolites. Coprolites are by far fossilized poop.
Episode 30.
By far one of the most common ways we can determine, yep, someone was eating tough stuff, because here's a poop with tough stuff in it.
Yes.
So for sure, it made it through at least a digestive system. One of the most famous ones that you'll often see is Tyrannosaurus feces. There are large coprolites from Canada, 1.5 feet long.
Which is big old poops.
Big old poops, which had to come from a large predatory dinosaur. The only one who really fits the bill in that area is T-Rex. These were very notable for having high levels of phosphorus and containing 30 to 50% bone material.
Yeah, just bone chunks.
Yeah. Some crushed to like the size of sand grains, like pulverized.
Yeah, yep. And this is an interesting point because it does mean that these animals weren't digesting all of that bone, but they were getting the bone in and digesting all the stuff around the bone.
Yeah. There was some digesting. They noted that there were rounded edges and surfaces to the bone. So the stomach acid was doing some work. But yeah, they weren't turning it to the powder and paste that crocs do.
Right.
So they definitely could be taking advantage of some of the nutrients in the bone. Maybe it's enough to get down to like get rid of the marrow and the good bits, but not actually all the bone.
Mm-hmm.
This was an important find because it confirmed what had been suspected of T-Rex for quite some time. Another famous such group with a similar situation were Durophagy dogs.
Yep, which have a nickname.
The bone-crushing dogs.
Bone-crushing dogs. Right there in the name.
These are super famous here in North America. They are a group of canids, so they're in the overall dog group, but they're subfamily.
Yes, they're not canines.
No.
They are Durophagines.
Yes.
Durophagine dogs. We mentioned these in episode 94.
Yeah. These are well known for having very similar anatomy to hyenas and have often been pointed at, especially in the early times of talking about them as North America's answer to hyenas.
Yep.
But it wasn't, confirmable for sure until coprolites were found that seemed to match to these Durophagy dogs and have bone shards in them.
Yep. Very much like a T-Rex poop.
Absolutely. They also show similar levels of digestion to striped hyenas, so probably digesting to a similar degree.
Yeah, and that's something about hyenas. Hyena poops have a bunch of bone in them.
Oh, yeah.
Because hyenas are eating bone.
They also noted that the concentrations seem to match with scent marking, like using latrine areas to mark with the poop.
Interesting.
So it also seems to give us some information about their behavior and social structure.
That's cool.
Which is awesome. Boop. Now, with both of those, we mentioned that they were suspected to be bone crushing before we found the coprolites. This is by far the most often way we detect a durophagous creature in the fossil record is that they have the features for eating hard stuff. Specialized anatomy to crush hard prey. This is definitely most often when you'll see a durophagous fossil animal. Usually they're referring to the fact that they have often teeth and jaws that are specialized for crushing food just based off the anatomy and the modern day crushing animals that we know. They have the same kind of features.
Yeah, those Durophagine dogs have jaws and teeth very much like hyenas.
Yeah. More shortened face than other canines, thicker jaws, more stout teeth, all things that help them exert high force and resist breaking to crush bone. There are a ton of bone-cracking carnivorans. There are fossil hyenas with these features. There's another cousin to Durophagy dogs that also seems to have separately evolved bone-crushing teeth. The Percrocudidae, which was another hyena-like group of mammals, that also seems to have gotten into bone crunching. So, carnivorous mammals have done this a number of times. Often always compared to hyenas, because that's the mammal that's around today. So you're all going to get named and compared to this one.
Yes. Well, and carnivorans are only shaped so many different ways.
Yep.
So odds are if you're a reasonably big carnivoran, you're also shaped like a hyena.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, they've got the jaws and the teeth and also kind of the body of a hyena.
Yep.
Unless you're a walrus.
Which is another one of those weird durophagous animals.
Yeah, which also are durophagus.
Where you use suction power to get things out of the shell. Because what?
Yep. Once again, put it in that D&D campaign.
Yep. just sucked out of the cave you're hiding in. One of the oldest groups, though, for at least vertebrates, are lungfish and their cousins. Sarcopterygians, the lobe-fin fish, and specifically the line that leads to today's lungfish, have a long history of crushing dentition. Today's lungfish have specialized teeth called odontodes, which are these plates on the upper and lower jaw that form these rough surfaces to crush and grind tough food up, and eventually they wear down into these almost pavement-like structures. There are members of this group that go back to the early Devonian with very similar to modern lungfish teeth, same kind of adaptations and facial structures for crushing tough prey, and predate all the other vertebrates that do it by millions of years.
Cool.
So lungfish have been doing this for quite some time, and it seems like they got to it fairly quickly, like within the first 7 million years of their lineage. So a fairly quick adaptation and specialization to this that then they have maintained. I saw it noted as the longest ranging lineage of durophagous vertebrates.
Oh, cool.
Like,
and we know that there was during the Devonian, there were hard-shelled things.
Oh, yeah.
There were cephalopods and brachiopods and all sorts of things with hard shells and hard parts.
And this is something that is very common in the fossil record, that a lot of the durophagous animals you find are marine.
Yes, that's where a lot of the hard-bodied stuff is.
Yep. So a lot of marine animals, even if the marine group in total isn't mostly eating tough stuff, almost every single one has a member that is eating tough stuff.
Yeah, durophagy, very sort of generally speaking, in the ocean, usually it's going after bivalves and other hard-shelled things, and on land, usually it's either eating bone, or seeds.
Yes,
like
exactly.
Seeds and nuts. There are other avenues, but those tend to be sort of the most focused groups.
And the prevalence of armored life in the ocean is just notably higher. We've talked about this a little bit in, I think it was the Marine Revolution episode, because there's a difference in freshwater and saltwater levels of armoredness, and it's probably just that calcium's more readily available in the ocean.
Sure.
So making that kind of armor is just way more common. There are fossil sharks that have these pavement-like pebble teeth. There's placodonts, which had these. That's one of my favorite examples I came across. Their name means tablet teeth. They were Triassic reptiles that have crushing teeth for eating shellfish, probably. And as time went on, as the Triassic went on and more marine predators started entering the ecosystem, they started to become armored. So they were durophagous predators that then became prey for durophagous predators.
That's awesome.
Right?
Has those shoes on the other foot. The tooths on the other the side of the grass.
Is this what I've been doing to people? So I belong here. There are mosasaurs with crushing teeth.
Yeah, like Globidon. Globidon, I think?
Yes, Globidon.
We talked about Globidon in episode 51 about mosasaurs. They have pebble teeth.
Oh, or Globidens.
Globidens, yes, thank you.
Absolutely.
Globidens with those pebble teeth.
Yes, there are ichthyosaurs that have crushing teeth. Mixosaurus. And the list goes on once again. Like, there are basically every member of predatory marine group you can think of. There is a member that has specialized in eating tough stuff at some point. There are also very famous members. T-Rex, as we already mentioned, but is probably, if you look up fossil bone eating, T-Rex is going to come up.
Yeah, that's the one that does it.
Yep. They've been suspected of eating bone for a long time because their face just screams strong bite with robust teeth. And those are things we typically see with crushing bones.
Yes, episode 120, we talked a whole bunch about those adaptations.
This is especially notable because most other theropods do not have faces that seem like they'd be good at crunching bone. So it was probably a fairly rare thing among predatory dinosaurs.
Yeah, T-Rex isn't representative of most predatory dinosaurs in that regard.
And that those differences stood it out as you were probably doing something different, and the shape your difference suggests is bone crunching.
Yeah, those powerful, sturdy teeth and powerful jaws.
We got confirmation with coprolites. That seems, yep, indeed, they were doing that. But there was some further questions. I found a paper talking about the fact that unlike bone-crushing mammals, their teeth don't seem to fit together the way you'd expect. Because bone-crunching mammals, our teeth meet tooth on tooth. Mm-hmm. Like, they occlude. So when you close your mouth, a tooth meets a tooth, top and bottom. And most bone-crunching mammals use that compressive surface to crack the bone and crush the bone between the teeth. T-Rex does not have occluding teeth. Their teeth fit over one another. The top teeth stick along the outside of the bottom teeth.
Like an alligator.
Like an alligator. The teeth don't actually ever really touch when they close their mouth. So you don't have that occlusal surface. So the question came up of like, then how are you crunching bone? What's going on? This is also true of most other, like, alligators and crocs. They don't crunch bone up finely. Mm-hmm. They can crack it, but then they just swallow it. The T-Rex coprolites showed that they were fracturing the bone down to a small size. So how were you achieving that?
They were putting them under the wheels of cars.
Right,
and
yes.
And the cars would drive over them.
First wheels.
And then licking them off the pavement.
Yep, snorting them. What they found through some modeling was a few features seemed to combine to allow T-Rex to be an effective bone crusher and fragmenter of bones to that small size. First is a ridiculous bite force.
So strong.
The models that have been used to estimate their bite forces have come out between 8,000 to 34,000 newtons. Ridiculous. Some of the strongest bite forces our planet has ever seen. The pressure on the tips of the tooth would also have been intense due to this. The teeth shape and the dental structure is also specialized to concentrate and withstand those high pressures. So really strong bite with specialized teeth, and then repeated biting.
Yeah.
They probably weren't shattering a bone on a bite. They were probably and chewing it into pieces through lots of biting processes. This is supported by one Triceratops that bears roughly 80 T-Rex bite marks, mostly around the frill of the skull.
Yeah.
That seem to support that repetitive biting, that they weren't just crunching and cracking it like a nutcracker, but taking bits and pieces with each bite and slowly working their way through it. So it's also neat to find that they weren't all cracking things the same way. Different kinds of jaws, different kinds of tooth structure. T-Rex was not cracking bone like a hyena. It's cracking bone like a T-Rex.
Yeah.
Which is cool. There are also wholly non-mouth ways to crack bones. Trilobites, we know, ate each other, and we know ate other armored things because we have tons of evidence of them eating each other, both through gut contents and coprolites and markings. They, though, don't have strong mouth parts. Their chewing body parts are on their legs.
Yeah.
Called gnathobases. On the first segment of their legs, there is this spiny-like structure that faces in toward the center of the animal. This is very similar to what horseshoe crabs have. Mm-hmm. And basically what this means is if they get a piece of food, they then pass it to the underside of their body in between these spines and then walk. Yep. And as they walk, the churning of their legs moves the spines like a piece of machinery and grinds up or shreds the food. Some trilobites have robust gnathobases. The one that most often comes up is Redlickia rex, one of the largest trilobites ever known. These grew up to at least 25 centimeters long, so just under a foot.
Big trilobites.
Big old, like, oven mitt of a trilobite. They have bulky, powerful legs with enlarged, sturdy gnathobases. So it immediately gave the suggestion of, were you crunching up other hard-shelled animals? Maybe other trilobites? They decided to do a biomechanical study to look into it, compared it to another trilobite, as well as horseshoe crab, and another uroarthropod from the Cambrian, Sydnea, which also has been shown to be durophagous due to gut content that it has, that specimens have been found with. And they found differing gnathobases seem to be likely to have been specialized for different feeding processes. Redlickia and Sydnea definitely seem to be good for durophagy. It also confirmed that horseshoe crabs can, which we already knew of them, but it supported that this method did identify them correctly. So they would have been able to. Sydnea wasn't quite as good, while Redlickia was very good.
Yeah, just churning up hard stuff.
Just underside nutcrackers.
Yep.
It's a little bit like those shredder machines like that you'll find videos of.
Yeah.
But what is even better than that, and I don't know what the actual name is, but there are rock crushing machines that just have basically a metal wall and this piston thing that just repetitively...
It's just a row of those.
Yeah, just punching things against themselves. The other trilobite had much longer spines, and those did not seem to be able to create enough force, so probably was for soft food. So we see specialization.
For shredding instead of pulverizing.
Precisely. This is cool because there were coprolites found with trilobite bits that were typically associated with Anomalocaris, the big Cambrian predator of the time. But they were also found in the same habitat as Redlickia, so after realizing that they would be effective, some of these could be from Redlickia.
Yeah, and we talked about some news not too long ago that suggested that Anomalocaris might actually have been more of a soft-bodied animal predator.
Absolutely.
That it was going after softer stuff, which means that those coprolites are more likely to be trilobites destroying other trilobites.
Yep. Which is also a great example of that it's not always easy to look and go, that's a nutcracker animal.
Yes.
Sometimes you go and you go, well, maybe you could, or technically you could create the forces, but are you really effective at that? It can sometimes be very hard to know, especially if we're missing musculature information, so we can't really know what else was going on.
A lot of those studies do what you've mentioned now a couple times, which is modeling those bits of anatomy.
Exactly.
Putting T-Rex jaws into a digital model, putting the trilobite legs into a digital model, and seeing what kind of forces could this then produce.
Yes.
And is that enough to break up a shell or to break a bone?
And they'll look at what forces can it exert and withstand.
Yes.
Because you also, if I can, like, you and I could go take some walnuts and crack them with our teeth.
That's true.
We'll probably need to go to the dentist afterward.
Yes.
Because our jaws can produce that strength, but it can't withstand it.
Yes, we will hurt ourselves. Another bit of anatomy that comes up quite a bit. We talked about a news recently. This might have been bonus news. Hey, if you're on Patreon, we have bonus news. That was comparing the teeth of fossil primates.
Yes.
And noticing that this one species has thicker enamel on the teeth than this other one, and that might be an adaptation for harder plants and harder foods.
Absolutely. So there can be subtle things that might not be noticeable visually.
Right, yeah, the teeth might look mostly the same, but if you actually do a cross-section, you can see the enamel is extra thick over here.
Like the mentioning with T-Rex, the microstructure of the tooth was an important note to how they reacted to those stresses.
Yeah.
So you can build your parts differently, if not in a different shape necessarily. One of the last pieces of evidence is one of the things that we've also alluded to a couple of times. There are often trace evidences of durophagy. We've found trilobites that have been chewed on.
Yes.
That have injury.
We found those Triceratops bones with bite marks into them.
Feeding traces is another way to identify that someone was chewing on this hard thing. Who it was might not always be easy to say, but we can find trace fossils. I found one paper that was talking about the fact that this is still a fairly recent field of identification. And so there's not a ton of ichnotaxa, the trace fossil way we categorize things. There was 22 recognized by 2016 when that paper was written. They said 9 of which were related to teeth traces. 6 are associated with invertebrate bioerosion in marine settings. 7 attributed to terrestrial invertebrates.
Okay.
These can include basically all the things we've been talking about this whole episode. Rodent marks, like you mentioned, finding in the forest. We find those in the fossil record, and a lot of archaeological sites and stuff. Yep. Evidence of mammals chewing on bone are also found. Also damage on mammal teeth from chewing on bone.
The wear on the teeth.
They know that that's important to note because that might give you the wrong idea of the age of the animal or like the state of the animal. They might seem less healthy when really they were just chewing on bone more.
Yeah.
There are some really interesting ones of osteophagic insects that chew and bore into bone and leave these markings like termites and woodworms into wood.
Yeah.
These include, they noted the boring styles include holes, notches, chambers, furrows, tunnels, and roseates. So all sorts of different patterns from different organisms. Very often it's going to be hard to figure out who made that. But
sure, but a bug bored through this bone.
Some kind of invertebrate, most likely an insect.
Cool.
These go back to the Triassic, and so they have been doing this for quite some time. I found one paper on boring in hadrosaur bones from the Cretaceous. There were at least 7 different patterns there, so a bunch of organisms seem to be chewing on it. And comparisons to today's necrophagous insects, so things that eat dead stuff, seem to match up with dermestid beetles, their larvae, and potentially termites that might have been chewing into a dry bone similar to wood.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Another very cool trace study I found was about the giant hyena, Pachycrocuta. This is a Pleistocene hyena from Europe and Asia. Largest hyena that we've ever found. Its body size was 20% larger than modern hyenas, about the size of a female lion.
Yep.
With a head about the size of a male lion.
That's fantastic. That's the best way to describe it. I love that so much.
Right? Huge, powerful head for crunching bone. Definitely was having a similar behavior. Big, robust body. This one did something that a lot of hyenas today aren't as famous for doing, which is it would carry things back to dens.
Oh, sure.
And we talked about this in the hyena episode, that there's tons of these caves throughout Europe that are full of bone that are interpreted as hyena dens, where they bring carcasses back to then feed in at their leisure. This hyena has a big, powerful body, so it would have been able to carry parts of the animal, and they noted, without dragging it, just deadlifting parts of an elk.
Like watching a leopard carry a deer up a tree.
Yes,
Just a hyena carrying something up to its cave.
Powerful animals, ignoring gravity for a little bit. But the cool note for traces is they found one of the dens and they looked at the state of the different bones to figure out what were the feeding habits of the hyena. They found that smaller, less nutritional bones, like the radius and the metapodial, so like finger bones, hand bones, little foot bones, were often complete and not damaged, not majorly touched. Larger bones with greater marrow capacity were often preferentially chewed on, more damage on them and parts removed from them, showing that they were feeding on the choice bones and leaving the smaller bones.
Yeah, they're not just eating bone to swallow bone.
Yes.
They're going after the marrow.
Absolutely. And it gives us an idea of how they would feed on a carcass, what parts. It also lets us know, if you're finding some of these bones but not the others, it might be because that's evidence of a hyena feeding.
If you only find the feet.
Yep. It's also the way that they're able to identify these dens as hyena den is the chewing on the bones. So some cool patterns that you can find with the traces, other than just saying someone chewed on this. By far, though, the most common evidence of durophagy in the fossil record, dwarfing all the others combined, is drilling predation.
Yes.
Like we mentioned at the first part, that drilling through a shell, you will find a shell with a little hole left in it from a predator.
Yes, we talked about this. We talked about this actually in our first Spotlight series way back when with Ranjiv Appa in our last episode of the series, who studied the drill holes in fossil shells, clams and stuff, to identify who was eating them.
Absolutely.
We've done educational programs with fossil material from the Aurora fossil site in North Carolina, and you'll find little invertebrates, and you will very often find little clamshells with perfectly round holes in them that this thing got et upon by a durophagous predator.
Yes, and we find so many of these in the fossil record. This has been happening for most of animal history. So we find tons of examples of different kinds of organisms. Snails are the most famous go-to, but there are cephalopods, there are other organisms, there are worms that can burrow through shells. These can give us tons of information, identifying the kind of predator, the group it came from, because different ones leave different patterns, body size ratios, the predator-prey, interaction and dynamic of an ecosystem, predation intensity in an ecosystem gives us kind of a ratio of it, as well as success rate, because you'll find attempted bores, but not completed.
Yeah, like a halfway. It got halfway through.
And so a lot of info can come from these. We've talked about these a number of times. They came up in Mesozoic Marine Revolution. We talked about it in the Spotlight. What I want to talk about here is a couple of things I found that are difficulties of those interpretations when it runs up against other durophagous animals. Because other things are also eating those shells, and it can affect the record of the drilling evidence. One paper found that if a secondary predator, they noted crab, but a secondary durophagous predator going after those hard-shelled things is present, it can change the pattern of drilling evidence. They noted that finding mollusk shells, shellfish, with repair scars, so they got damaged but then were able to start repairing the damage, so they survived an attack, is often used as a proxy for durophagous predator presence. It's sometimes hard to find on a shell that a durophagous predator smashed it, because a smashed shell looks like a smashed shell.
Yes.
But damage on it means someone attacked you, you survived, but they were strong enough to crack your shell a bit.
Yes.
So that was probably a durophagous predator that you survived. So that's evidence that that's around. When they find evidence of that, they'll often find that it is in sync with incomplete drill holes and lower drill hole frequency, which might indicate that they're getting interrupted by competition with other predators.
Yeah.
That
like a snail is halfway through drilling into the shell, and then a crab shows up
Yep.
to grab that shell.
Exactly. And so you'll get a difference in the frequency of complete versus incomplete drill holes and total frequency of drill holes with evidence of other durophagous attacks.
Interesting. Which is so fascinating, because we talked about way at the top, one of the major benefits of specializing in durophagous habits is to avoid competition.
Yes.
That I'm the only thing here that can eat clams or mussels or whatever, so I have cornered the market on that. The idea of different durophagous predators competing with each other using different styles and different techniques for cracking those shells is very cool to think about.
It feels like those scenes in movies where like the safe cracker or the rogue is picking a lock and then the big burly barbarian person just finally takes a hammer and knocks the door down.
Yes. That's the crab. The crab's kind of like, you better finish that clam real quick.
You are taking too long. There's also something I found called the durophagy bias, in that other kinds of durophagy, crushing durophagy in an environment, can affect the interpretations for drilling evidence because it removes some of the other shells.
Yes.
So what you end up is a higher ratio of drill evidence to shells present, because a bunch of them were removed by things that were swallowing those shells
Yes.
and taking them out of the equation. So you have to take into consideration that your evidence of drilling might seem like, whoa, there was a bunch of drilling going on. Like half the shells we have are drilled. Well, you might have lost a portion of the other half.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you may have lost 50% right off the bat to just being destroyed. A quarter were drilled.
Exactly.
But it's half of what you got.
Yes. So there's
a survivorship bias.
Yeah. So there are patterns that can kind of complicate interpreting these ecosystem interpretations.
Yeah. Which is another really interesting point about durophagy, is that it is a habit of animals that can impact the fossil record.
Mm-hmm.
Because durophagy is damaging and destroying hard stuff, which is usually the stuff that fossilizes.
Absolutely.
Which means both that we are more likely to find evidence of durophagy, because that evidence is being left in terms of a trace on a bone or on a shell, and those tend to fossilize very well, so we're likely to see those.
Exactly.
But it also means that that shell is damaged.
Yep.
Which could make it less likely to survive the fossilization process.
Yeah.
So durophagy is kind of doing a little, it is both working against us and for us in interpreting the fossil record.
Absolutely. It's very much a double-edged sword in a lot of ways. It complicates things, but it gives us some beautiful evidence of predator-prey interaction that most other predations never will.
Yeah.
Like, we will never find a beautiful example of an envenomated prey.
Right.
Because
that's just not likely.
It's not going to fossilize, so we can only interpret if the predator was venomous. We won't know who you envenomated. To wrap things up, the last example I have, this is my favorite example I came across because it so nicely encapsulates all the different forms of evidence, and it's about an archosaur. This is Smock Wawelski. This is a Triassic archosaur from Poland. This is an early archosaur. They noted it has a kind of a mixture of features, some dinosaurish, some Rawasuchian, so a little more crocomorph, some early archosaur, so it probably wasn't quite in any of those groups. It was an early member somewhere at the base of Archosauria.
Yeah. Smock Wawelski is my favorite Monsters, Inc. character.
Yes. Yes, smock is after the word for dragon.
There you go.
Yep. So it's perfect. I love it. This is a large predator, 5 to 6 meters. So this is a big animal, pushing 15, 20 feet, and was probably bipedal. Like, it has front limbs that still look like feet, but they're way shorter than the back legs. Probably a if not facultative bipedal, like often bipedal.
At least sometimes bipedal.
Could probably move around better bipedal like than on all fours, but it probably still could do all four stuff. It has several features that suggest that it probably was able to do some bone crunching. Big, massive head with a robust body. Lots of musculature that could go on to exert powerful bites. They also found some large coprolites that are 50% bone fragment from a number of prey taxa and very fragmented. These also contain fragments of large serrated teeth, similar to smock, and match in size and dimension and location to smock, so seem to be its coprolites. There's also isolated worn teeth, which is another thing we didn't talk a bunch about because I didn't find a ton of studies specifying it, but like tooth wear can also give you information of, you were doing something with your teeth that was causing high stress. So you were biting really hard on something. Bone-rich regurgitolites, so throw up.
Sure, like the pellets that birds will regurgitate.
Absolutely. And a bunch of bitten and crushed bones from Dicynodont, which was another Triassic animal at the time. One juvenile fibula had the distal head, the end head, removed completely, bitten off. The size of the bite marks match smock, and all of this collected in the same bone beds that smock was found.
Cool. So you're just checking all the boxes.
It's got the anatomy. We've got coprolites and regurgitolites. We've got trace elements. We've got tooth wear. Everything points to that smock was crunching up bones, and they pointed out very similar to the way T-Rex does, and that puts it at the beginning and end of the Mesozoic. Large bone-crunching predators doing a similar kind of job in the ecosystem.
That's very cool.
Which is very satisfying. This is where we will wrap up our discussion on durophagy and osteophagy. As mentioned, there's so much more we could say. There are so many cool, notable fossil organisms with just weird pebble teeth that we could go on and on about all day long, but we shan't. We're going to wrap it up.
Once again, if we missed your favorite example, let us know. Get in the Discord or on our social media and leave us a comment.
You can request a bunch of those specific ones.
That's true.
That's the thing you can do. But for now, we will wrap up our discussion and move on to our final segment, our patron question. Every episode, we like to answer a question submitted to us by one of our patrons, which you can do at certain levels, and then answer it here on the podcast for you all. David, what's our question today?
Our question for this episode comes from TenFam, who asks, if you had to pick your favorite fossil site, which would you pick?
A fun question. I had to go look up mine because I couldn't remember the name of it.
Sure.
But I knew which site immediately.
You knew where to go. You knew time and place.
I knew which fossil animal to look up to find the site. There is a site in Niger, in Africa, that is the Ekar Formation. This is a Cretaceous age site, so 100 to 95 million years old. And it has a whole bunch of really cool crocs. This is the site. It was made famous a while ago when they did a documentary about it. Because this is where Caprosuchus, the boar croc, came from. This is also where Leganosuchus, the pancake croc that has that big flat snout. This is also where Eryrippasuchus and Anatosuchus. Eryrippasuchus, which includes both dog croc and rat croc, which were these small little terrestrial crocs, one of which, rat croc, had projecting forward-facing teeth, kind of like rodent incisors. And then duck croc, Anatosuchus, which has a flattened snout.
This is like a 80s cartoon to compete with the Ninja Turtles.
Yep. They were all discovered at the same time by the same paleontologist, and the documentary was emphasized, so they all got nicknames.
Yes.
These are a bunch of mixture of terrestrial and aquatic. There's also Elosuchus, which was like a 25-foot-long gharial-esque crocodilian, probably fully aquatic. So everything from fully aquatic to big, like Caprosuchus, I think, is estimated, I don't remember what its full estimation was, but the head is like 50 centimeters long. So it's a almost 2-foot head. Big, decent skull, and was most likely terrestrial. So a big terrestrial predator with compressed, more knife-like teeth and giant fangs. And the site also has some cool dinosaurs. There's Egyptosaurus, the big sauropod that was found there. Carcharodontosaurus.
Excellent.
Famous big predator. And Spinosaurus remains have been found from there. There's other things, but just some really cool stuff. And a bunch of super awesome crocodilomorphs.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I don't know if I could pick a favorite fossil site.
Yeah, I'm going to tell all the other fossil sites, whichever one you pick.
That's really tough. Listen, the Messel Pit's got a lot of great snake fossils.
It's pretty cool.
The Gray Fossil Site, obviously, we've talked about a whole bunch, and it's got my snake fossils, my personal, the ones that are mine. There's a whole... Go listen to all the fossil site episodes that we've done.
Yeah.
The Jehol biota,
you tell us
152.
Which ones David sounded most excited.
There you go. Listen to all of them back to back.
You tell us which ones is David's favorite.
The Jehol 152, Naracourt, which was 32, way back in the day. Burgess Shale was 89, Messel was 160, Maison Creek was 110. There were other ones. Hell Creek 127.
Yeah.
Hell Creek's a very cool fossil site.
Yeah. Those some cool options.
Yeah, I hope all those numbers were right. Probably.
We'll find out. Someone will let us know.
Someone will let us know.
Thank you, Tin Fam, for that question.
Yeah, they were all right. I was like, hang on, we're going to have to go back and fix them.
And with that, we can start wrapping up this episode. This was a ton of fun. I had so much fun learning about all these different forms of durophagy. As we said, let us know if we skipped your favorite or if there was a favorite part. Check out the blog for lots of images and sources. There will be lots of cool links and lots of pictures of some of this neat anatomy. Don't forget to keep an ear out for Spotlight. Next episode's coming up soon after this released. Thanks again to everyone for your support and involvement in Croc and Snake Month and helping make those amazing and incredible. And now it's just time to get ready for DragonCon at the end of the month.
Yeah.
Thank you to our requesters for this fun topic. Thanks to our new patrons for joining us and supporting us. And extra special thanks to our tippy top tier patrons, Sarah May, Danielle the Bug Lover, Robert Mart, Bugs All the Way Down, and Melissa Barksdale.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. We release episodes every fortnight.
Sure do.
And that's...
Stay tuned for the next one.
Yeah.
We are rapidly approaching episode 200, so stay tuned for something special.
Ironically, this episode I don't think will end up being a super long one. I don't know yet because I haven't edited it, which means it's not as tough a swallow.
It's compressed.
Yeah.
It's been smushed in.
Yeah, so this one's not as durophagous as a lot of our other episodes. Not as much as Leaf was.
But it was a lot of fun.
Yes, no, tons of fun.
Tons of fun. I'd say we crushed it.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Common Descent Podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and check our WordPress blog for pictures and links after each episode. Huge thanks to our patrons whose support helps keep this podcast running and who get access to bonus goodies on Patreon. The song you're hearing is called On the Origin of Species by Protodome, which we found at ocremix.org. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.